Hello, welcome back to the channel 12-Step Guide with Troy O. Today we are continuing our Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, 4th Step, Now About Sex, Column 2. We did our previous column last video, and we've done a series of videos on Step 4. If you haven't reviewed those, I encourage you to see those first. So now about sex. Last time I suggested you make a list top to bottom of all the people you ever had sex with. That's a little bit off of the instructions Bill provided, but I'm going to get into that now so we can split that into maybe 2 different papers. So let me first read what Bill said. We reviewed our own conduct over the past years. So that's our own conduct, in control of our own sex behavior and outcomes. On your list, there may be unwilling situations where something occurred and you weren't willing. So it could even be called rape sex. There's a host of various concepts there. So my suggestion is make a second list. It's not going to be identical to the first one, but it provides a format to consider other areas. This is an Alcoholics Anonymous 4th step. It's not a sexual survivor's 4th step. It may not quite fit well with some other problems out there. However, it's a good beginning towards understanding, asking the questions, getting down to causes and conditions, drivers in this area. In some cases, the same name may appear on both lists. Someone who's married might have had situations out of their control, for example. Now, even for a survivor, this doesn't excuse a victim from looking at their own sex conduct, nor should it excuse an offender from looking at both. And why? Let's look at the offender a second. Imagine a scenario where they've committed crimes, yet crimes have been committed against them. Again, trying to find causes, conditions, and drivers. But this is an Alcoholics Anonymous Big Book, 4th step, looking at sex, and we're not going to get that involved. There's just a wide range. Bill told us, don't be the referee. There's too many examples, but we will try to take a good look at it. So having said that, now we're going to look at column 2, and we're going to read those instructions right from the book Alcoholics Anonymous. I have the original, page 81. It might be on page 67 or 68 in one of the newer books. So column 1, we reviewed our own sex conduct over the past years. Column 2, question: where had we been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? And that's the only reading today. The rest is going to be me using my own experience and trying to maybe define out a little bit what he's asking. So I've made a bit of a list, not much for examples, but I've made a list so that you can see what I've done. And a little next to the words, a little Next to selfish, SH, or dishonest, D, inconsiderate, I, because we're just looking to trap doors and just simple information, basic, simple information. So, again, where have you been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? So, what is selfish in this capacity? It pains you to have to consider the needs of others. You're concerned mainly for oneself or one's own advantage, pleasure, or welfare, regardless of others. Maybe it's self centered, self seeking, before, during, or after sex, or building up to sex. Because remember, this is about sex, the sex instinct, building up to it. Hey, maybe there's situations that you never quite got to having sex, but it's worth putting on the list. It doesn't have to be perfect, you understand? If there's a place where sex issues could be contemplated, that second list, you could make a third list and adjust it. At this point, if you've been following along and you're thinking for yourself, you can consider these other avenues. Now, there's also other 12-step programs and other work out there that have covered various parts of this in great length, depending on where you may be coming from. But there's an interesting thing about alcohol and drugs. It can really lower your ability to feel right from wrong. It can really inhibit that. So you're potentially not even aware. In the best of conditions, in the best of circumstances, you miss cues along the way. Maybe, for example, maybe somebody cared for you more than you realized. Maybe they had some needs you just couldn't see. And again, these are in the best of conditions. Alcohol and drugs, man, it can do wonders on this. You can be years figuring this stuff out if you don't look at it. You may never figure it out, but it's an important area, because if you didn't figure it out, maybe it could be continuing in some capacity. So, how about dishonest? Lying, deceitful, untruthful, fraudulent, cheating, and misleading in any form that will affect others or ourselves. Before, during, or after sex, or building up to it. How about inconsiderate? Little regard for the rights, needs, or feelings of a mate. Unkind, uncaring, cold, without empathy regarding sex, before, during, or after, or building up to it. I just want to keep focusing what these questions specifically apply to. I want to also address the concept of addictive behaviors. I've used the term, it's not covered in Alcoholics Anonymous, but I'm broadening these out so that other 12-step programs or other people can find the step one that works for them. Now, in some cases, addictive behaviors could be an additional step one down the road after an alcoholic addresses, say, some of the primary issues. They come back around, come back to step one. Let's look at the possibility that selfishness, dishonesty, or being inconsiderate can be an addictive behavior. And so, what do I mean by addictive behavior? Let's broaden it out. Habits, reoccurring behaviors resulting in a negative outcome for ourselves or another, maybe patterns. Now, this is different than healthy behaviors. You may have a repeat pattern that generally is resulting in the best possible outcome. It doesn't mean someone might get hurt along the way, but there is a best possible outcome. And that's a different avenue. You know, if you have a reoccurring behavior to pay your bills on time, well, that's a healthy behavior. I encourage you to keep doing that. So I've only covered 3 in the addictive behavior area. And when it comes to the emotional suffering portion, well, these addictive behaviors, continuing to say be dishonest with your spouse because you were cheating, or you're not fulfilling your end of the relationship, can cause them this emotional suffering. Your inconsideration, your selfishness can hurt them. And we don't need alcohol and drugs for these things to occur. They can happen without it. If you've ever combined violence and nudity, you might want to take a look at that somewhere here. Potentially on the second list, or a list that doesn't quite fit perfectly. And I believe a good way to also consider the list, if the mate, the other person, had sufficient facts, and you presented them these questions, would they see it the same way you do? So there's some empathy in there, but other ways to look at it, ask the question. And you trap indoors to talk about it later to better understand yourself and causes, conditions, drivers, what makes you tick. A lot of different outcomes from sex and relationships and children and marriage and belongings, and certainly victims, blackouts, for example. A quick story. Back when I was working in corrections as a counselor, there was a sex offender, and he was in a blackout when he did what he did. So he reported not remembering it, and basically reported apparently he only does that when he drinks, and he's not drinking, so everything's fine. Well, you'll understand if I didn't see it that way. Anyway, moving on, just an example, it's better to try to look at the whole picture as best as you can, because some of the behaviors here may relate to your other lists. For example, something happened here and it caused things to happen there. It drove my drinking back when I was in AA. Early on, 40 years ago, there was a lot of men reporting issues out of a religious history, for example. Another area certainly was military. Now, this stuff isn't talked about in any detail in AA. If something happened, certainly someone might touch upon it if it drove their drinking. But there's other places I covered in the last video to get into this stuff more. And there's plenty of ways and information out there to be able to cover this stuff more. So we'll just use a quick, common maybe example. List all the people we had sex. So anyway, let's say the husband. And so where was I selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate? Well, I was selfish because I'd been staying out longer than I should, not taking the relationship seriously, lied where I was. The other party had needs, and maybe I wasn't seeing those. There's a host of examples that could apply here. Other examples, you could be an old boyfriend or your wife, maybe a gay lover. Maybe you were married and had a gay lover, and that was a problem. Yourself somehow, or others, a victim, just for example. There's a host of different ones. So you just go down that list, top to bottom, and contemplate where you'd been selfish, dishonest, or inconsiderate. Spend a little time on that, and then come on back and we'll review 3. Well, thank you very much and have a nice day.
If you found this video helpful, please like and subscribe. Ring the bell to be notified when new content is added. Also, you can support the channel 12-Step Guide with Troyo by donating through PayPal to hsworldservice@yahoo.com. In Step 4, we are laying the groundwork and planting seeds for the 9th step promises. Those promises are: we are going to know a new freedom and a new happiness. We will not regret the past, nor wish to shut the door on it. We will comprehend the word serenity and know peace. No matter how far down the scale we have gone, we will see how our experience can benefit others. That feeling of uselessness and self-pity will disappear. We will lose interest in selfish things and gain interest in our fellows. Self-seeking will slip away. Our whole attitude and outlook upon life will change. Fear of people and of economic insecurity will leave us. We will intuitively know how to handle situations which used to baffle us. We will suddenly realize that God is doing for us what we could not do for ourselves. Keep moving forward. It's worth the effort,